Shinano was an aircraft carrier built by the Imperial Japanese Navy during World War II, the largest such built up to that time. Laid down in May 1940 as the third of the Yamato-class battleships, Shinano's partially complete hull was ordered to be converted to an aircraft carrier following Japan's disastrous loss of 4 of its original 6 fleet carriers at the Battle of Midway in mid-1942. One of 2 additional Yamato-class battleships ordered as part of the 4th Naval Armament Supplement Program of 1939, Shinano was named after the old province of Shinano, following the Japanese ship naming conventions for battleships. As with Shinano's half-sisters Yamato and Musashi, the new ship's existence was kept a closely guarded secret. As a result, Shinano was the only major warship built in the 20th century that was never officially photographed during its construction. The ship is only known to have been photographed twice, on the 1st of November 1944, by a Boeing B-29 Superfortress reconnaissance aircraft from an altitude of 9,800 meters, and 10 days later, by a civilian photographer aboard a harbor tug during Shinano's initial sea trials in Tokyo Bay. In December 1941, construction on Shinano's hull was temporarily suspended to allow the IJN time to decide what to do with the ship. The Navy decided that Shinano would become a heavily armored support carrier carrying reserve aircraft, fuel and ordnance in support of other carriers rather than a fleet carrier. As completed, Shinano had a length of 265.8 meters overall, a beam of 36.3 meters and a draft of 10.3 meters. She displaced 65,800 metric tons at standard load, 69,151 metric tons at normal load and 73,000 metric tons at full load. Shinano was the heaviest aircraft carrier yet built, a record she held until the 81,000 metric ton USS Forrestal was launched in 1954. The ships had a design speed of 27 knots, but Shinano never conducted full-speed sea trials, so her actual performance is unknown. Shinano was designed to load and fuel her aircraft on deck where it was safer for the ship. Experiences in the battles of Midway and the Coral Sea had demonstrated that the existing doctrine of fueling and arming their aircraft below decks was a real danger to the carriers if they were attacked while doing so. Much of Shinano's hangar was left open for better ventilation, although steel shutters could close off most of the hangar sides if necessary. Much like Teiho, the only other Japanese carrier with an armored flight deck, Shinano's flight deck functioned as the ship's strength deck and copied British practice as seen in their illustrious class carriers. Unlike the British carriers, Teiho and Shinano had unarmored sides to their hangars. According to Lynn Lucius Moore's Shinano, the Jinx carrier, the steel flight deck was covered with a thin, shock-absorbent latex sawdust compound. Shinano's primary armament consisted of 16 40 caliber 12.7 cm Type 89 dual-purpose guns in 8 twin mounts, 2 at each corner of the hull. Even though Shinano's avgas tanks were protected by armor that could resist a 155 mm shell, the IJN attempted to isolate the tanks from the rest of the ship with a cofferdam. The builder was unable to increase the number of workers on Shinano and could not meet the new deadline of October. Shinano's launch on the 8th of October 1944, with Captain Toshio Abe in command, was marred by what some considered an ill-omened accident. On the 19th of November 1944, Shinano was formally commissioned at Yokosuka, having spent the previous 2 weeks fitting out and performing sea trials. Worried about her safety after a U.S. reconnaissance bomber fly over, the Navy General Staff ordered Shinano to depart for Kure by no later than the 28th of November, where the remainder of her fitting out would take place. Abe's request was denied, and Shinano departed as scheduled with the escorting destroyers at 1800 on the 28th of November. Shinano carried 6 Shinyo suicide boats, and 50 Oka suicide flying bombs. Her other aircraft were not planned to come aboard until later. As a measure of how important Shinano was to the naval command, Abe was slated for promotion to Rear Admiral once its fitting out was complete. At 2048, the American submarine Archerfish, commanded by Commander Joseph F. Enright, picked up Shinano and her escorts on her radar and pursued them on a parallel course. Over an hour and a half earlier, Shinano had detected the submarine's radar. Normally, Shinano would have been able to outrun Archerfish, but the zigzagging movement of the carrier and her escorts intended to evade any American subs in the area inadvertently turned the task group back into the sub's path on several occasions. He assumed Archerfish was being used as a decoy to lure away one of the escorts to allow the rest of the pack a clear shot at Shinano. At 2:56 on the 29th of November, Shinano turned to the southwest and headed straight for Archerfish. A few minutes later, Shinano turned south, exposing her entire side to Archerfish, a nearly ideal firing situation for a submarine. 4 torpedoes struck Shinano, at an average depth of 4.27 meters. The damage to Shinano was at first judged to be manageable. A half-hour later, Shinano was making 10 knots with a 13-degree list. At 10:18, Abe gave the order to abandon ship. By this time Shinano had a list of 30 degrees. At 10:57 Shinano finally capsized and sank stern first at coordinates 65 miles from the nearest land, in approximately 4,000 meters of water, taking 1,435 officers, men and civilians to their deaths. Shinano's construction had not been detected through decoded radio messages or other means, and the American analysts believed that they had located all of Japan's surviving carriers, even though a captured Japanese aviator had revealed in July 1943 that a third Yamato-class battleship was being converted into a carrier. Once the existence of Shinano was discovered, Enright was credited with her sinking and awarded the Navy Cross. Post-war analysis by the U.S. Naval Technical Mission to Japan noted that Shinano had serious design flaws. The failure to test for water tightness in each compartment played a role as potential leaks could not be found and patched before Shinano put to sea.